Step into the magic. Watch the stories come to life. This is a celebration. Every color shines so bright. Turn on your light. Come on and live the magic. So much to find. Come on and live the magic.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Live the Magic. In this show, we look deeper into many of Disney Parks' current attractions and shows. In today's episode, Arlo's gonna mispronounce a ton of words because he stayed up super late watching crap on the internet rather than recording this earlier. Today's episode is a follow-up to my Remember the Magic episode on the original Disney's California Adventure, as today I will be talking about what changed in DCA during the beginning of the Iger administration and beyond. While it's absolutely not necessary to see part 1 of this video, I highly recommend you do, because this video is really a continuation of the topics I discussed in part 1. With that said, let's continue. I finished the last episode's history segment by introducing Disney's new CEO, for 2006, into the story. Bob Iger took over the job of CEO after Michael Eisner's departure in September of 2005. The most recent parks open under Eisner's lead were becoming more and more disappointing. Parks such as Walt Disney Studios Paris and Hong Kong Disneyland come to mind. While Iger sought to fix these parks as well, his main focus was where it all began, or at least across the street from where it all began. Hong Kong and Walt Disney Studios were absolute disasters, but DCA, at least in Iger's eyes, was much worse. At least Hong Kong and Studios looked decent from the outside. DCA at the time looked tacky. Iger and his team began devising ways to fix the parks almost immediately, though the fruits of these labors wouldn't begin to appear until 2007. That year, Bob Iger announced a full-blown overhaul of the park as a whole. Iger at the time was not afraid of big-budget projects, as he correctly realized that fixing an already cheap park with further cheap expansions would not solve anything. Iger revealed that this project would cost a whopping $1.1 billion and would take place over the following 5 years. Though things initially took a while to begin, Toy Story Midway Mania was the first attraction in this expansion to open in Paradise Pier. The ride was built on the site of the former Maliburrito and was... Wait. Go back. Maliburrito. Really? Let's just have a moment of silence for that name. Okay, moment over. Anyway, this ride was to open alongside Florida's version. However, while the ride opened in Disney's Hollywood Studios on May 31st, 2008, DCA's version didn't open until June 17th due to unknown reasons. Either way, the rides are pretty much identical aside from the queues and exteriors. This ride marked a turning point for DCA, as it was the first true addition to the park since 2004 that people were actually interested in, often racking up insane wait times that really don't make sense given this ride. Don't get me wrong, I love the ride. It's easily in my top 5 attractions in this park, and when it opened, it would have been in my top 3. But it seems a bit like a Peter Pan's Flight situation, where people wait in line for sometimes hours for certainly a charming ride, but one that is barely more than 60 seconds. And while Midway Mania is considerably longer than 60 seconds, I feel like the longest time I will personally wait for this attraction is 30 minutes. Which is why it's always one of my first stops when I enter DCA. While the waits have gone down considerably over the years, the addition of Fast Passes in 2017 was helpful. This ride is still quite popular on both coasts to this day. In fact, the ride was so popular in its early years that Tokyo Disney Sea, what is considered the best, most immersive theme park in the world, opened up a flat-out clone of the attraction in 2012. But moving back to DCA, this was only the beginning of the plan, and things were changing more and more every week. Over the following years, many of DCA's attractions closed and were either rethemed or completely removed in order to make way for the expansions, all of which will get discussed in the design segment. Though a couple things reopened early on, such as Mickey's Fun Wheel, the first major addition opened on June 11th, 2010. World of Color received outstanding praise upon its opening and was Disney's answer to both the failure of Luminaria in 2002 and the removal of Disney's Electrical Parade just a few months earlier, as a way to have nighttime entertainment return to the park. I won't talk about it a lot here because I have a whole video dedicated to that, but long story short, this show utilized, and actually still utilizes whenever entertainment returns to the parks, fountains, lasers, isopar flames, projections, and much more to present a spectacle of light and wonder. This show is just another sign of what was to come. While 2011 brought such expansions as The Little Mermaid, Ariel's Undersea Adventure, and Goofy's Sky School, the big changes arrived in 2012. As in late 2010, 2 areas of the park got completely demolished. First was the entrance area, Sunshine Plaza, which had always been a disappointing start to everyone's California adventure. As part of the 5-year plan, they would adapt this area into Buena Vista Street, which was to be designed after the Hollywood that Walt Disney would have arrived at in 1939. The second area to be demolished was strangely the Bountiful Valley Farm, which was removed to make way for DCA's biggest expansion yet. In 1998, when the park was being planned, one of the ideas that ended up getting shelved was Carland. This area would have been dedicated to California's world-famous automobile culture. However, at the time, management was not impressed with the idea, and it did not make it into DCA's final plan. But in 2006, Pixar released a little movie called Cars, and suddenly there was an interest in Carland again now that there was a possible IP attachment. After months of planning, an S was added, and Cars Land broke ground 11 years ago today on July 8, 2009. Construction on the 3 new rides would end up taking 3 years, but with a sequel to the movie coming out not long before the land's opening, fans waited eagerly. Clearly, the quality of the sequel did not matter. On June 13th, 2012, guests filed into Disney's failed second gate for the last time, as after a 1-day closure to prepare, the new Disney California Adventure, now without the apostrophe S, would be reopened on June 15th. On this day, guests crowded into the new entrance area and were greeted by a stage set up in the hub of the park. Bob Iger led a rededication as he welcomed guests to the new Disney California Adventure. This was the opening day for both Buena Vista Street and Cars Land, both of which housed many interesting attractions I will discuss in the design segment. While this was the end of Iger's 5-year plan, a few more expansions came throughout the years, but as we get close to the Ketchup administration, things began getting a little less logical. It went something like this, starting with the announcement of Luigi's Rollickin' Roadsters in 2015. Oh, cool, a new Cars Land ride! Though, really, the first trackless ride in the US and it's a glorified teacup ride? Huh. Next came, oh, that's interesting, they're retheming the Tower of Terror into Guardians of the Galaxy. While that really doesn't fit into the park thematically, it certainly seems cool. Let's see what happens. And finally,
next summer, Paradise Pier becomes Pixar Pier.
What is this crap? And speaking of those changes, let's dive into them. Let's be honest, no one asked for Pixar Pier. It's a disappointing retheme of a land that had its problems, but was made even more problematic by the changes. While I think some changes, such as finally putting something in the vacant lot formerly home to the Maliboomer or building more eateries were good ideas, other things just weren't. For instance, California Screamin' held its last guests on January 8th, 2018, and just over 6 months later, the ride reopened as the Incredicoaster. While this change did not alter any of the actual track, thank God, it did change the theming. I know I've gone back and forth on the importance of theming in the past, but it is important. Theming is what separates places like the Disney parks from places like Six Flags. Guardians gets a pass because it was a teaser of things to come. More on that later. But Pixar Pier has literally no coherence. We go from 1960s Metropolis with the Incredicoaster past some boardwalk games into a girl's brain in 2015, all without traveling more than a few hundred feet. Paradise Pier was never the best theme, but at least it made sense. It was a boardwalk amusement park from days gone by. Now it's just a mess of IPs that have no idea what they're even doing there. Anyway, in 2017, after Mission Breakout opened, there was a massive freakout among Disney fans that the original 2001 Hollywood Pictures backlot would be turned into Marvel Land. Later we found out this idea was mostly correct, but that instead of Hollywood Land getting replaced, it would be a Bugs Land. Well, I'm not gonna pretend like this was some huge loss. A Bugs Land did fit theming and overall was quite cute. At least for a while, it was located directly behind the Bountiful Valley Farm, so the idea that you were traveling from the farm to the world of the insects inside it made sense. And while the Bountiful Valley Farm was demolished in 2010, a Bugs Land still kinda fit because they were smart enough to keep a small portion of the farm as a transitional area. While I am intrigued by the idea of Avengers Campus as we've come to know it as, it barely fits into the park at all. Disney had to come up with a story that makes absolutely no sense that this is some kind of facility in California for the Avengers just to make this fit in. And while this is a better explanation than we got for Pixar Pier, it's still not a perfect fit. This expansion is clearly based on the fact that this IP is popular, and not because WDI thought that it would be a good expansion to the park. That said, I am really excited to see what they do with this concept when it opens in 2020 at some point. So that brings us up to today. What does the future hold for this park? We don't even know when it's reopening, so I can confidently say that if there were any big expansions to be announced, they're off the table now. We don't even know if the second phase of Avengers Campus is coming. Anyway, while the first phase of Avengers Campus is too far along to be cancelled at this point, I have no idea what's going to happen to Phase 2. Though if Phase 2 does not happen, that does leave one more expansion plot for the future. So who knows? With that said, let's move on to the design segment. Because last time I went land by land discussing each attraction, I feel it's only fair to do the same here. Let's start at the entrance. The original postcard entrance was demolished, and the California letters can now be found at Cal Expo in Sacramento. But the actual entrance structure was demolished as well, now built to resemble the entrance at Disney's Hollywood Studios and Walt Disney World. That I'm sure is built to resemble something, however, I'm too lazy to look it up. Entering the park, Sunshine Plaza was the only land to be 100% demolished, as there is literally not a single thing from the original entrance area other than a few load-bearing walls still in the park today. If you look closely, you can spot some of the old building facades because they're a different shape. While Sunshine Plaza had 0 attractions, Buena Vista Street has 2. Well, technically 1 with 2 stops. The red car trolley travels from the park's entrance through the park's hub where it makes another stop, then down to Hollywood Pictures backlot before ending its route at the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror / Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. The overhaul of the entrance area also saw the removal of the Golden Gate Monorail Bridge, which is now designed to resemble the Glendale Hyperion Bridge. The removal of Sunshine Plaza also involved the removal of the, Sunshine Plaza area, which now features a Starbucks, the park's main gift shop, and Elias & Company, named after Walt's father, and my personal favorite restaurant at the resort. Oh no, not Carthay Circle. That place is way too expensive for my taste. I'm talking about the bar on the first floor of Carthay Circle. I have literally never had a bad experience here. While Carthay Circle does have some amazing food and drinks, you can find quite a bit of its menu in the lounge. This restaurant is just one of my favorite places to be at the park on a hot day. It's always air-conditioned and you can have a drink while you wait. In my case, non-alcoholic, but alcoholic beverages are served as well. Moving right along, we come to Hollywood Pictures Backlot, or as it is now known, Hollywoodland. Other than the name, this area has changed very little, not only over the last 9 years, but even over the last 19. First off, as I talked about last time, the horrendous Superstar Limo got replaced in 2006 by Monsters Inc. Mike and Sully to the rescue. While this ride is not super popular, it is one of my favorites. Disney is known for their incredible dark rides, and this is just that, an incredible dark ride. Going back outside, unfortunately, Muppet Vision 3D closed in 2015 to make way for a Frozen sing-along. This lasted until Frozen Fever was over, and then the space got converted into a movie preview theater. Fortunately, Disney did finally do something semi-permanent with the space, and in 2019, as a compliment to Galaxy's Edge, Mickey's PhilharMagic opened on April 26, 2019, thus initiating this ride into the exclusive club of rides that can be found at every Disney park around the world. Except Shanghai. While I love PhilharMagic, it's not on the same level as the other attractions in the club. I mean, look at the other ones. Space Mountain, It's a Small World, Haunted Mansion in one form or another. All of these e-ticket rides are so much more than the D-ticket at best PhilharMagic. While I'm happy I don't have to go to Florida just to see this show anymore, now I have to do that for Muppet Vision! Ugh, fine, moving on. Aladdin, a musical spectacular, ended on January 11th, 2016, was replaced by Frozen, live at the Hyperion on May 27th. I would say something about this show, but I've actually never seen it. Moving on. The most controversial change to Hollywoodland came in 2017, when Disney announced that a certain fan-favorite attraction would be reskinned. Disney announced that the Disney Junior Live on Stage would be replaced with Disney Junior Dance Party. Okay, obviously that was a joke. The real outrage of 2017 came from the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. Disney announced that the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror would have its final ride on January 3rd and would be replaced with the first ever Marvel ride, at least one created by Disney in the US. After a downtime that in hindsight was short, but at the time felt like forever, Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout opened on May 27th, 2017. Spearheaded by Imagineering legend and one of my personal heroes, Joe Rohde, this attraction is fantastic. I hate riding it because droppy make tummy upset, but looking at this objectively, it is incredible. Don't get me wrong, this thing does not fit theming at all, at least at the time, but I don't really care. There is so much fan service in this ride, like Figment in a frosted over box, the original Harold in the boiler room along with Dolores from the Country Bear Vacation Hoedown. This ride is fantastic, but so was the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, and there lies the debate. Which is better? Well, while I personally believe that the concept of Twilight Zone Tower of Terror is better, being based on a fictional original episode of The Twilight Zone Disney created, Mission Breakout is a better ride. Disneyland's, and by extension Paris' version of the Tower of Terror, has always been vastly inferior to those in Florida and Tokyo. If either of those versions closed, this would have been a very different story. But the fact the worst of the 4 closed does not bother me. In fact, I'm glad they were able to pour new life into this attraction. Let's just hope Avengers Campus is the same level of quality. Moving right along, the next land to cover is the old Golden State area that got divided in 4, but kinda 3, but we'll get to that. The first new area to emerge was Condor Flats, which got reabsorbed into Grizzly Peak in 2015, becoming the Grizzly Peak Airfield, though these two are nearly identical in everything but the name. The only major change came in 2016, when in honor of Shanghai Disneyland opening, Disney replaced Soarin' over California with Soarin' around the world. And while both are great, I prefer the original because it's in a park about California and you are soaring over California in it. World is great too, but I do prefer the original slightly more. Nothing else really changed in the land other than the changing of the awful taste pilots into the much more appetizing Smoke Jumper's grill, which is like if they turned Tony's at the Magic Kingdom into an Arby's. Not fantastic, but light years better than what it replaced. The only other things that changed were the paint scheme and a few added props, so let's move on. Grizzly Peak was the next land to emerge, but it remained 100% identical, still featuring DCA's no longer signature attraction in Grizzly River Run and DCA's oh, I had no idea this existed attraction in the Redwood Creek Challenge Trail. The next area, the Bountiful Valley Farm, changed a lot, in that it got completely demolished, so that's the end of that. The last area to split off is Pacific Wharf, which also remained identical, other than acting as a third entrance into Cars Land, but we'll get to Radiator Springs in due time. While Golden State was split into 3 pieces, they all remained pretty much identical, which can't really be said for the rest of the park. Next comes the big expansion, Cars Land. This area features 3 attractions: Radiator Springs Racers, Mater's Junkyard Jamboree, and Luigi's Flying Tires, a tribute to the old Tomorrowland Flying Saucers attraction, but a misguided one that closed in 2015. It was replaced by the first ever trackless ride in the USA in Luigi's Rollickin' Roadsters. So, just to be clear, Hong Kong gets an amazing Haunted Mansion equivalent, and we get a glorified spinner. Well, that's Iger for you. He knew where things needed to go and when. Cars Land is really incredible. It has one of the best rides in the whole park, and overall is just a beautifully done area. The final area to cover is Paradise Pier, which I will respectfully never call by its current name unless it is absolutely necessary. While a lot of things changed, a lot stayed the same as well. First off, Golden Dreams was leveled, and in its place, Disney built The Little Mermaid, Ariel's Undersea Adventure, a spectacular dark ride that takes you through a cut-down version of the movie. Mulholland Madness got a new paint job and became Goofy's Sky School, which is literally the exact same coaster, except it's blue now. The Golden Zephyr and Jumpin' Jellyfish remained unchanged, but the Orange Stinger had its peel removed and became Silly Symphony Swings, the same ride, but now rethemed to the 1935 Silly Symphony, the band concert. The only attraction on Paradise Pier to be removed entirely, other than Golden Dreams, was the Maliboomer. Its load platform became a smoking area for a while until they built a Toy Story meet and greet there, and eventually this monstrosity. The Sun Wheel was turned into Mickey's Fun Wheel, a change that literally did nothing other than plastering Mickey's face on the center of the wheel. California Screamin' remained identical, but now with a new safety spiel featuring Neil Patrick Harris. Of course, the big change to Paradise Pier was World of Color, a show I've talked about surprisingly a lot this summer given my experiences with it. While a lot of these things still exist today, we now have to enter the terrifying world of bad rethemings by talking about Pixar Pier. First off, let's talk about the actual additions that are good. There's more food on Paradise Pier now, yay! We now have the Abominable Snowman's Frosted Treats, the Poultry Palace and Senor Buzz's Churros from Toy Story, Angry Dogs, and the addicting Jack Jack's Cookie Num Nums. Along with these came a retheming of the popular Bayside restaurant Ariel's Grotto into Lamplighter Lounge. Sure, it made a restaurant that was almost popular enough to walk into and possible to get a seat at again, but other than that, yay, a new signature dining experience at DCA! This restaurant is quite beautiful, with old Pixar art decorating the walls, and I have to say, if all of Pixar Pier looked as good as this, no one would be complaining. The food is also fantastic, but unfortunately I have only been able to get into breakfast at this restaurant because it keeps getting booked up at every other time. Now on to the bad things. The Incredicoaster. It's fine, just blatantly cheap and not well thought out. California Screamin' was fine as it was, and I would say something about the carnival games, but I don't really care about them. Then there's the candy store that somehow took literal years to complete, and this monstrosity, and look, if you're gonna reskin an old ride and put it in a different place, just don't say it's a new ride, that's just false marketing. Also, these figures are just sad. Their lack of character is laughable. It's so obvious these were originally going to be in animatronic form and got budget cut, but I've ranted about Chapek enough in this video. They've also renamed Mickey's Fun Wheel into the Pixar Pal Around. It's the same ride from 2001, but with different cabins now. Anyway, that's the end of the design segment, so now let's move on to the conclusion. As much as I have a soft spot for the original Disney's California Adventure, the new version is better in every way. And when I say new version, I mean the 2012 to 2017 version, not what exists now, but we'll get to that in due time. The original was tacky and lacking any sort of Disney identity. Now it's anything but those two things. It went from being that boring second gate to being the 12th most visited theme park in the world in 2018. Though I feel that as of today, the park has lost its identity. The park isn't about California anymore. It's becoming another IP land, and that's a real shame. Not as big a shame as Epcot, but Epcot's day of review is coming soon. I'm really curious to see what they're going to do with this park in the future, but until then, let's look back at what Disney did right. While Iger sought to fix all of Eisner's budget parks, his biggest success is easily DCA. Iger absolutely helped Hong Kong, but it's still not profitable. It would have been so much worse had Disney not made it better, but that's a whole other can of worms. And with Walt Disney Studios Paris, the updates are still coming, so we'll just have to wait and see. DCA, in my opinion, is Iger's biggest success in the parks division, as it still can't top acquiring Pixar, Marvel, and Star Wars because those were all incredibly smart business moves. But creatively, I think it's his biggest success. And while I have my problems with the current version of this park, it's still kept the great stuff for the most part, and I still love this place. This park features some of my favorite rides at the resort, and I don't put it past Disney for making these mistakes as of recently, as there are still so many great things here. While Disneyland Park is my home away from home, DCA is more like that house's backyard. Overall, it's a bit of a mess, but it does feature some of the best times as well. And with that, we end our California adventure and keep moving forward. Thank you for watching this episode of Live the Magic. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking the video and maybe even subscribing to my YouTube channel. There are a lot of videos coming out this summer you won't want to miss, so be sure to click the bell icon so you get notified when we upload a new video. Have a great, big, beautiful day, and remember, tomorrow is just a dream away.
Step into the magic. Watch the stories come to life. This is a celebration. Every color shines so bright. Turn on your light. Come on and live the magic. So much to find. Come on and live the magic. Come on.